As I said, we'll start off with autism. For those of y'all who don't know, I have a 16-year-old son who has autism. And so this class is near and dear to my heart. A little bit of history, it's really come a long way. 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, Chris was there with me, but this idea kind of started rolling around in my head, and then we did a Capt with the Kentucky Autism Training Center where Heidi works, and we got to talking, and she had already done a 50-minute webinar with Lexington Fire on the same subject. So we took the outline from that, started putting this together, and began teaching it. We got approval through K-Beams, so it is an official training for continuing education. We have trained, or it has been taught to, all of Louisville Metro EMS, Metro Safe, all the county fire departments. Starting February, we'll be starting to train all of LMPD. We've been to Bowling Green, Land Between the Lakes. Taylor County was one of our first ones. Covington, and several other places. Just yesterday we found out, or we got picked up by AP, by the Associated Press. So we are extremely excited about this, very, very proud of it, and we've got some great feedback. So hopefully you guys learned something today. The reason we do this class is you're going to run across individuals with autism on your job, and I already have. And Dan, I don't even know if I talked to you about this, but we did a few months ago. You remember that little structure fire where you, okay? That kid come running out of the house. I didn't do it. And I picked up pretty much immediately. I was like, this kid may have autism. And I'm pretty sure he probably did light it. But you're going to run across these individuals. And you need to know the characteristics. And you're going to need to know how to, for lack of a better word, handle and to interact with these individuals, and possibly to de-escalate, situation if they're having a meltdown or something like that. And we'll explain what that is. Okay. This is Heidi Cooley-Cook. She works for the Kentucky Autism Training Center, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Hi guys. Thank you all so much. Like Chad said, we've been working on this project for a few years now. We're super excited about it. LMPD has just signed on, and we'll be training all officers starting in February. So we're very, very excited that Louisville is kind of going out ahead of the game to get trained, because we're fortunate in that we've not had any national stories, right? But national stories exist. Stories that have made national media about interactions with first responders and individuals with autism. We don't want that in Louisville. So with getting trained, hopefully you'll be able to identify the characteristics of an individual with autism, and then utilize some of the strategies that we'll teach you in the second part of the course so that you can best interact with them. We're going to start out with a small clip from Sports Center. This is an individual named J-Mac. And he has autism. Has anyone seen this piece?
Football manager, Tom Rinaldi kid, his class, his coach, and the best in sports. All.
What we all want in life is a shot. But what we do with it, that's the story we all want to tell.
I've coached for 25 years, and I've never experienced that, the emotional high of what happened.
What happened for Jason McElwain, or J-Mac as his friends call him, is about more than a shot. Diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, now identified as highly functioning, he's never considered himself different or separate, especially when it comes to sports.
Sports has always been, how could I say, his equalizer. He's just like any of the other kids out there.
It's not really a big deal at all. I'm just normal like other people. That's the way I am.
At 5'6", J-Mac didn't make the junior varsity basketball team at his high school, Greece Athena, near Rochester, New York. Instead, he became team manager, a role he now has for the varsity as a senior. In the last 3 years, in his white shirt and black tie, he's missed only 1 game.
Going to practice, I set up the clock and get the water in games and be enthusiastic.
As this season was wrapping up, Coach Johnson approached Jason with an idea about the Trojans' final home game of the season.
I said, you know, I'm really going to look to try to get you in the game, but remember, I can't promise you that. And he goes, okay, Coach.
February 15th, Greece Athena against Spencerport, senior night. With word out that Jason might play, the student section printed signs of J-Mac's face, just in case. And with 4:19 left in the game, with the Trojans up by 20, Coach called down to the end of the bench for number 52.
I just kind of turned and pointed at him, and he almost ran right on the court. He was so excited.
Hey, Jay, you got to check in. So he hits the buzzer, and he doesn't go anywhere. It's like, now you go on the court. You know, he was so caught up in the moment.
He came into the game, they all stood up and they put the signs, you know, the pictures of him up, and I got really emotional. And I sat down and started to cry.
With 3:46 left, Jason got the ball.
When he missed that first 3, I was like, oh, and then it airball, and I was like, man, I really just want to see him score one time.
I put my head in my hands, I go, dear God, please, just get him a basket.
Then, with 3:12 left, another chance.
That third trip down the court, magic.
As soon as I started hitting my first shot, I just kept shooting, and I was just hot as a pistol.
Shot after shot after shot kept going in.
The basket was like this big, huge bucket, and I was shooting like they were free throws. It was just a big, huge bucket that's like huge.
You know, I was like, oh my God, is this really happening? He has more points than me, so he's got bragging rights over me. He was unstoppable for that moment in time. He was unstoppable.
He comes down the court right at the end with like 3 seconds left, and he hits this one that's, you know, probably like an NBA 3. As soon as the gun ended, they stormed the court, you know. I couldn't, you know, I just couldn't dream anything like that.
It felt like we won a championship. Everyone was just so happy for me.
In that 4 minutes, 19 seconds, Jason was 7 for 13, 6 of 10 from three-point range, 20 points in all. In the end, Jason McElwain was the game's high scorer.
Truly the most incredible moment I've ever had in coaching. I was so touched, and it was just so special to me that a young man, his dream came true, you know, and that I could help that. It was awesome.
What we all want in life is a shot. J-Mac took his, and now it's a story we can all tell.
If it sounds like a story for Hollywood, you'd be right. McElwain and his parents have heard from about 25 movie production companies, ranging from Walt Disney Company, ESPN's parent company, to Warner Brothers to independent filmmakers. As for Greece Athena, the story doesn't end. Tonight, the team wins its semifinal sectional game. J-Mac with them all the way, back in that white shirt and black tie, handing out water bottles, encouragement, and of course, inspiration.
That clip went on to win the ESPY for the greatest moment in sports, beating out Kobe Bryant's 81-point game, and a little team called George Mason and their run to the Final Four. So pretty miraculous. That was back in 2006. Since then, Jason has gone on to community college. He is an assistant coach for that basketball team, and he is now also a marathon runner. Extremely fast marathon runner. In his first marathon, he qualified for Boston, which for those of you that are not runners, not super easy to do. And then in his race in Boston, he ran that in 2:57:05, which is basically about 6-minute, 45-second mile. And he sustained that for 26.2 miles, which to me is just unbelievable. So that's one person's story. He is an individual with autism, and as we'll talk about in the first half, individuals with autism vary greatly, just like you or I. Everyone's unique. And so as we talk about the characteristics, you might see a lot of those in one person. You might see 1 or 2 in one person, and that person might be greatly affected in one aspect where not as impacted in another. So we'll talk about all of those things as we move forward. So we're going to start with going over what is autism. It's important to recognize the history of autism and myths surrounding autism, because what you think about autism or what you hold true about autism can shape how you respond. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll spend the bulk of the time with me going through the characteristics of autism. As we'll discuss in just a few moments, you can't look at a person and tell that they have autism. Okay, so you'll need to be looking for these characteristics, behavioral characteristics, characteristics that you'll see in their communication style, so that you'll be able to kind of put the pieces together and say, yes, I think this person may have autism. And then you can go to the other part, which will be Chad, and the strategies, and put those into place, because they're evidence-based for people with autism. And even if they don't have a diagnosis of autism, then there's a great likelihood that those strategies will still work for those other individuals too. Chad will take over with number 3, and he'll talk about some incidents with first responders, spend the bulk of his time looking at strategies, and then we'll wrap up talking about identifiers, devices, and resources. I'll say it now, and then we'll say it at the end as well. If you ever have questions, either professionally or personally regarding autism, you can turn to me or Chad as a resource, and I know through the course of our training that there are many of your colleagues that also have loved ones on the spectrum. So turn to them and ask them questions as well. But if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask, and we'll try to get you the answers if we don't have them. So what is autism? Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It affects a person throughout their lifespan. So it's not that they will be affected by it in early childhood, and then as they go through school, they lose their diagnosis. They are no longer autistic. Quite the contrary, a lot of individuals with autism aren't diagnosed until 4, 5, 6 years old. Some individuals with greater language skills are diagnosed even later than that. It affects the whole person, so it's not just going to affect their communication. You'll see in a moment the triad of characteristics, and it's going to affect lots of different aspects of their brain, and it affects them as a whole person. It's also going to impact them in any situation, all right? So it might impact them more at Walmart if they have a sensitivity to sounds and big crowds than it would in a quiet library, but they will still have characteristics of autism in any environment. So this is the triad of characteristics. I absolutely love this slide. It's a really nice visual representation of the characteristics. So if we think of a triangle and the 3 points, it helps us remember the triad of characteristics of autism. So at the top we have social interaction. So individuals with autism have a deficit in social interaction. They also will have deficits in communication, and then they will have restricted activities and interests. And as we go through the characteristics slides, we'll have this on the corner, and we'll be talking about characteristics that are specific to each of those triad. So this is where I said RJ instead of JMac. This is RJ Pete. He is the son of Holly Robinson Pete and Rodney Pete, right? So Holly Robinson Pete is an actress, and Rodney was a quarterback in the NFL. RJ is an individual with autism. And I put his picture up here as kind of a really prime example. If you saw RJ walking down the street, would you know that he had autism? Yes? No? No, right? He looks like anyone's child, okay? He does not have facial characteristics. He does not have any special shape about his body or anything like that. You cannot tell by looking at someone. Now, if you started to engage with RJ, if you started to have a conversation with him, if you started to watch him and his behavior as he was interacting with his environment, most likely you would start to see some of the characteristics, all right? I also on this slide have the prevalence rate data. So in 2002, we were looking at about 1 in 150 individuals having a diagnosis of autism. At 2012, which is the last data set that we have, it was 1 in 68. Okay? The reason that the last data that we have is 2012 is that in 2013, we released a new set of criteria for diagnosis. So when that information comes out, we'll have a new graph that has from 2013 on, because we'll be comparing apples and oranges otherwise if we put it on the same graph. But there's definitely been an increase. The reason why is the multi-billion-dollar question. There are lots of reasons that people are tossing around. Mostly what we know is that we have definitely increased awareness, and we've also increased the amount of providers that are providing the diagnostic evaluation for autism. So that has been a huge help in getting individuals into some therapy and intervention services early on. This is another individual with autism. This is Dr. Temple Grandin. Does anyone know of Temple? No? All right. So Dr. Temple Grandin, if you looked at her outfit and kind of her background scenery, where would you think she lived in the U.S.? In the West, yeah. Good job, yeah. So she is a professor of animal sciences at Colorado State University, all right? And she is world renowned for her work with cattle and livestock and humane slaughtering practices. So she learned very early on that she has a connection with animals, specifically with cattle, and she learned that at her aunt's ranch. And what she found is that if they are herded in circular fashion, then they are less tense and they resist less. You know, they're not trying to go backwards or trying to not move or things like that. They go pretty smoothly. So now she travels the world and people use her knowledge about animals to put more humane practices into place. She's also a world-renowned speaker about autism and her experience as an individual with autism. She didn't speak until about 3.5 years old. And she was born in 1947. So as we'll see in a slide or two, or about that same time, we thought that it was the mom's fault. We thought that individuals with autism probably just need to go to an institution because they're not going to amount to much. And now look at her. You know, she has a PhD, she's traveling the world speaking on autism and also on animal sciences. So definitely don't count anyone out. This is one of our favorite quotes from Temple. She said, autism spectrum disorders are varied and no two individuals will manifest the same set of characteristics at the same level of intensity. And at the Autism Training Center, if you see other presentations from us, you'll see this a lot. If you've met one person with autism, that's what you've done, is met that single person with autism in that snapshot of time, okay? As we know, we all grow and develop and change over time, so do individuals with autism. So like I mentioned earlier, Temple was born in 1947. In 1949, we thought that it was because of moms. We thought that they didn't have a good relationship, a good attachment to their children. And that was the cause of their lack of eye contact, not wanting to be touched, not responding to their name. We know that that is completely false. It wasn't until 1980 that we had this category of autism by itself. Before that, we thought that it was a type of schizophrenia. All right? So I mentioned this again as a reminder that this is our history with regards to autism, and some people might still hold true to some of these beliefs. So I welcome you to challenge them. So in 1980, autism received a separate category. In 1994, something important happened. We had something called autism spectrum disorders that was created, and that's with an S. And so this was an umbrella of diagnoses that an individual could be diagnosed with, all right? And the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is what psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, you might also see pediatricians at times utilize the DSM to provide a diagnosis to someone. So under this huge umbrella, we had things like Asperger's syndrome. Is anyone familiar with Asperger's? Yeah, okay. So we also had PDD-NOS, and that stands for Pervasive Developmental Disorder, not otherwise specified. We saw those kiddos being identified with PDD-NOS versus autism. They had all the characteristics, but most likely they had missing pieces of information. So a big part of the evaluation is parent report and parent history of their child's early development. So if there were lags in information, perhaps they had been moving from home to home, maybe parents had medical issues and couldn't keep track of those things. For whatever reason, we were missing those developmental milestones and when they were meeting them. The other time that we saw PDD-NOS a lot was in abuse and neglect cases. So I worked with a little guy who I was pretty convinced was on the autism spectrum. And whenever he went for his evaluation, they came back with PDD-NOS. And the reason that they cited for that was that for the first 5 years of life, he was in his home, he didn't leave ever, and he had very little interaction with anyone within the home. It was a really severe case of abuse and neglect. And so it was very hard to tease out why were his lack of communication and social interaction skills, was that because of autism, or was that because he simply hadn't had the opportunity and encouraged to develop those skills? So we saw that. Well, in 2013, the DSM-5 was released, and that's what we're currently using. And whenever that was released, what we learned was that that umbrella with all these different diagnoses went away. So individuals prior to that have a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome will maintain that diagnosis until for some reason they need to be re-diagnosed. There's a very strong culture surrounding Asperger's syndrome, and sometimes you might hear the term ASPIE, A-S-P-I-E. Very, very tight-knit community. Reminds me a lot of the deaf community and deaf culture. So those individuals were rightfully so kind of concerned that that might go away with this new DSM-5. Also, without that umbrella, we also are no longer diagnosing individuals with PDD-NOS. So you've heard me throw out a lot of different terms already. And so I mention all of this to you because if you are responding to a call and someone says, "This is Jamie and she's on the spectrum," I want you to know that that means that she has autism, okay? That she is on this autism spectrum. If you hear someone say that Frankfurt has ASD, it's the same thing. He has autism, okay? Rett syndrome was something that used to be under that umbrella of autism spectrum disorders. And Rett syndrome affected mostly girls, and they would be developing pretty typically, and then something would happen. It's a genetic disorder. And they would start to regress and lose skills rather rapidly. Childhood disintegrative disorder acted in the same way, but it affected boys and girls. And that was not a genetic disorder. Both of those, Rett syndrome is now just diagnosed medically versus having it fall under autism spectrum disorders. And then childhood disintegrative disorder has just fallen off as a diagnosis. Additionally, again, you might hear someone say that so-and-so has Asperger's, or they might self-report that they have Asperger's. And then on the spectrum, you'll hear that most commonly from parents or caregivers, or individuals that work with individuals with autism. You might also find that you hear me saying individual with autism versus autistic. I encourage you to do the same using person first language. So it's an individual with Down syndrome, not a Downs boy or girl or man or woman, right? It's the same premise. There is a growing group of individuals that prefer to be called autistic. In those situations, they'll let you know. So obviously, honor their request, and if they say, "Hey, I prefer to be called autistic," say, "Sure thing," and then go from there. The demographics for autism, we looked at the prevalence rate of 1 in 68. What we know is that it's affecting about 4.5 times more boys than girls. So that comes out to 1 in 42 boys or 1 in 189 girls. What we are seeing now as research is continuing to focus in on girls more and more is that much like with ADD and ADHD, initially that was seen a lot in boys and not so much in girls. And what we learned was that we didn't know what the characteristics looked like in girls. And that's what we're finding with autism as well. That there might still be a higher prevalence of boys than girls that will have a diagnosis, but we need to do a better job of identifying those characteristics in girls, especially young girls. We've talked about this before, that they might not have any visible characteristics. We talked also a little bit, without plainly stating it, that it can affect anyone from any background, right? So it doesn't matter your race or ethnicity. It doesn't matter how much money or how little money you have in your bank account. It doesn't matter if you live in a big city or a small rural town. It can affect anyone. We also talked about it being a neurodevelopmental disorder. We know that it affects the motor and sensory processing systems of the brain. So as we talk about some of the characteristics of autism, and then you layer on that there might also be some motor deficits, you'll see that a lot of the characteristics, if you don't pay attention to other things in the environment, you might suspect that the individual is intoxicated or on some sort of illicit drug. So just keep that in mind as you're interacting with individuals. Does anyone know who this is? Sheldon Cooper. What TV show? Big Bang Theory. Raise your hand if you have not seen Big Bang Theory. Excellent.
There have been a couple, so don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I was just going to tell you that we'll remedy that. We'll get you hooked up. So Sheldon Cooper, it's never explicitly stated that he's on the autism spectrum, but if you sat down with the criteria and watched an episode, just about any episode, you'd be like, check, check, check. And as we show you some clips in here in a few moments, I think that you'll have that same experience. So we talked about the history. Now we need to look at some of the myths. It is in the same manual as the mental health disorders, okay, like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and those things. Autism is not a mental health disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disability. Remember that back in 1949, we thought that it was because of moms. We thought that they didn't have a good attachment to their child. Some people still hold true that they think that if parents just spanked their child more often, that their kids would not have autism. You know, they wouldn't be acting like that. Completely not true, and research shows that spanking doesn't help anyone. But we have individuals in this world that think that autism is because of bad parenting. Number 3, we added this because whenever we were first developing this training, it was right whenever the Sandy Hook tragedy occurred. And there was a lot of media attention about the individual that did all those terrible things, that he was on the autism spectrum, specifically an individual with Asperger's syndrome. And there was a lot of media attention looking at or are individuals with autism more violent than you or I? And we know that that's not true. Individuals with autism are no more violent. That individual did those terrible things, and he happened to have autism. The next one is autistic individuals cannot form social relationships. So whenever we look at the Triad of Characteristics, and we'll go more in depth in just a second on this, but one of the diagnostic criteria, one of the criteria that they have to meet to have that diagnosis of autism is that they struggle to understand, maintain, and create relationships. Okay? So if that's part of the diagnostic criteria, it's not that they don't want to, it's that they struggle to. They struggle to understand how to do that and to maintain those relationships. Also, we have that they are not empathetic or compassionate. Again, that's a huge myth. A lot of individuals with autism note that they feel that they're more empathetic and more compassionate than you or I, but because they have such a difficult time expressing emotion, that they have a really difficult time in kind of communicating how they're feeling in those ways. So there's my favorite graphic down at the bottom again, just to kind of remind you of the Triad of Characteristics. So the general characteristics that you might see, again, remember that you're not going to see physical characteristics, but what you will see are differences in behavior, all right? We might also see seizures. That might be the reason that you're called to a home, is that a seizure has lasted longer than typical and they need your support. It's not until after their seizure has stopped that you find out that the individual has autism, either by their characteristics that they're exhibiting at that time or by parent report at that time. They may have co-occurring diagnoses. So they very well might have bipolar disorder. They might have depression or anxiety. Depression and anxiety are very, very common, especially in individuals that have a lot of the social and communication skills, and that starts to create a really big gap, especially as they enter into adolescence and early adulthood. They see their brothers and sisters and other people going off to college, getting married and doing all those things, and then they get really upset and down, and rightfully so, because they want those things. They just don't know how to, and they don't know how to make it happen. They struggle with those things. Remember again that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Who's this? Yes, yes, yes. Has anyone not seen this? All right. I don't believe you, but that's okay. So I hadn't seen it until I was married. My husband was like, you work with individuals with autism. You've not seen this classic Hollywood portrayal of someone with autism. You have to watch it. Well, I watched it, and then I hated Tom Cruise. Why did I hate Tom Cruise? True statement. Yes. And what did he do? Yeah, he yelled at him. He exploited him, right? What was his gift? Savant with regards to numbers, right? And so what did Tom Cruise do, for those of you that didn't really watch the movie but told me you did? He took him to Vegas, told him to count cards, right? So what were some, in Hollywood, as typical, kind of blew up his characteristics, right? Larger than life. But what were some of his characteristics of autism? Routine. What routine specifically? There was something he had to do every day. Wapner. Might have been Wheel of Fortune too, but Wapner for sure, right? What happened if he didn't watch Wapner? Meltdown City, right? It did not go well. He also had some issues with clothing. He wanted it from specific stores, right? He had lots of things like that. All right. So under this triangle here, in the far right corner, we have restricted activities and interests. And so that's what we're going to focus on for the next few minutes. So one of the big things that is part of that corner of the triangle are sensory and motor issues. So with sensory differences, a lot of individuals with autism report that those differences are what make their lives kind of so challenging. Raise your hand if you know someone with autism. Look around the room. Nobody ever looks around the room. All right, the reason I have you look around the room, I know, what is wrong with him? I don't know. So the reason I have you look around the room is that it is infecting a lot of families. And not that those individuals are within your families, but you know more and more individuals with autism, okay? And those individuals, I bet if you asked them or if you watched them interact with their environment, those sensory differences impact their life on a daily basis. So some individuals are hyposensitive to sensory experiences. And so those individuals, like let's say with pressure. So have you ever met someone with or without autism that will just drop to the ground or runs into walls? No? Well, that might be because they're seeking out pressure or that they're seeking out that impact, all right? So that's not uncommon, especially in little younger children with autism. We'll see that a lot. They might also be hypersensitive to different things. So a lot of times what we see are sensitivities to light and sound. So with sound, you might see individuals wearing noise-canceling headphones. Some individuals will just wear earbuds all the time. Sometimes they don't have music playing. It's just to kind of drown out a little bit of the sound, because if you put earbuds in, it does kind of muffle the sound a little bit, right? Other individuals have a difficult time with textures, and that can come into play with clothing. It could also come into play with food, right? And then we also have the sense of smell and the sense of taste that could be impacted by food. Whenever we look at sensory differences, think about responding to a house fire. Let's first look at smell. What kind of smells might that person be experiencing that they've never experienced before? Good smells? You guys love it? No, it doesn't smell good, right? There's lots of odd, weird smells, especially depending on what's burning, okay? Then we've got the sense of sight. What may they see or might not see? Flames. So some individuals might think flames are really cool, so that puts them in a sense of danger, right? Other individuals might be experiencing smoke and not being able to see anything, so that might be really overwhelming for them. It would be for me as a neurotypical person. Other things, the big one I think that could impact a lot of individuals are the sounds and what's the other one? I want to say sounds and sounds. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. But the sounds could be really, I'm thinking sight, with the lights and things like that. So with the sounds, though, so many individuals report that they struggle with sensitivity to sound. And I've heard that you guys like to yell. No? Yeah. Chainsaws? Sirens? Smoke detectors? right? All these things are going on, and these are all atypical sounds for this individual. So it's new, and it's overwhelming, okay? And I can't see anything, and there's flashing lights whenever I try to leave my house. It's very, very overwhelming. So it can make a really bad situation 10 times worse. They might also be hypo or hypersensitive to pain. This can be a really big issue. So let's say that you are responding to an automobile accident and the individual has a cut on their arm and they are just hysterical and you think that they are, have some sort of broken bone somewhere. It could be that they are hypersensitive to pain. On the flip side, you can look at their arm and tell that it's broken and they are engaging with you like nothing has happened. Okay, they might be hyposensitive to pain. Okay, there's an individual that I just met the other day who her son actually has a diagnosed condition of being hyposensitive to pain, and she literally has to check him head to toe whenever he comes in from playing outside, because he could have fallen off the bike and came back in after doing that and have a broken leg and is interacting like there's nothing has happened. It's kind of insane to think about, but some individuals just perceive pain in a completely different way. This could really come into play if the next one is also in play. So imagine if someone has eloped from their home, they've wandered from their home, they've left their home without their family knowing, and they are only in their boxers because it's in the middle of the night. And it's a day like today where it's frigid outside. If they are hyposensitive to temperature and climate extremes, they're not sensing that like you or I. And then if you throw on top of that they're hyposensitive to pain, they're not getting those warning signs that our body gives us, the tingling, the burning sensation, all those other things that happen before you get frostbite and hypothermia that kind of signal to us to get inside. So those are really big, important things to note if you are, one, looking for somebody that has wandered from home. You need to know if these things are in play. And then also, if you're responding to something where the individual might be hurt, you need to kind of know where their pain threshold lies. Rigid routines is something that could be very impacted as well in your responses. So I gave the example of house fires to many previous classes, and then someone yesterday said, we respond to like 3 of those a year. What we respond to more often are, do you call them med calls? Is that right? And so one of the things that he was worried about was responding to a med call that affected a caregiver. And then the individual with autism is at home with that caregiver and how that situation is all going to work out. And one of the things that could happen is that that person with autism has to go to the hospital or wherever that person needs to go. So this might really come into play. So that person's not hurt. The person with autism is not hurt. And you are about to disrupt their world, right? It is 1 o'clock and they're watching Judge Wapner, and you're telling them that they now have to drop that and leave and go in this big scary thing that's shaped like a box and go to the hospital with their mom. All right? Their routine is completely thrown off. If you can find out from the caregiver what their typical routine is and kind of implement that as best you can to make their normal in a different environment, it's going to serve you and it's going to serve that person very well. So it might be that you get out your cell phone and search for old episodes of People's Court and try to get that on for them. Okay, you'll rack up data, which Chad always says, but it's going to make everyone's life a little bit easier. Repetitive behaviors in stimming. So you might see this in lots of different ways. Sometimes repetitive behavior can be in the form of verbalizations. So they might echo what you say. They might do that immediately, or they might have delayed echolalia, where they will be repeating lines or complete scripts of TV shows, lines from books, movies. It could be a whole gamut of things, all right? Sometimes they can do this very functionally. You'll be asking them a question, and unless you've seen that episode of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, you don't recognize that they're answering you in a line from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Or it can be very dysfunctional, and that individual could be reciting a line from SpongeBob SquarePants, and it's, 1, completely inappropriate for the given situation, but 2, doesn't really have anything to do with the current conversation. You could also see these repetitive and stimming behaviors in the stereotypical type of situation. So whenever we think of autism and that triad of characteristics, One aspect, like we have circled down here, are those restricted and repetitive activities and interests. A lot of us engage in self-stimulatory behavior. I'm looking around, and I have 2 leg wigglers in the room, 1 foot wiggler. You stopped when I looked at you, though. It's okay. And the reason I point that out is that most of us have these characteristics. We might do them for a number of reasons. We might do them to keep us alert, to calm us, to annoy people that are around us. And in the given course of the day, we might do it for all of those reasons, that same behavior of tapping our foot, all right, just to meet those different needs throughout the course of the day. If you see someone with autism engaging in some sort of stimming behavior, it could look very similar to what you or I would do. It might look a little bit different. One of the ladies that I used to work with, or she was a little girl at the time, she's in her 20s now, but she would take the sharpest pencil, you know, those electric pencil sharpeners that get the lead so sharp that as soon as you write they break. She would have it that sharp, and she would wiggle it in the periphery of her vision. Loved doing it. It was her favorite thing in the whole wide world. It brought her a lot of comfort. Did it bring comfort to me as her clinician working with her? No, I was a nervous wreck. But that was her comfort item, and it was also her self-stimulatory behavior. Other individuals might have strings. There was a report out of Phoenix the other day, or last month, 2 months ago, where a teenage boy was walking down the street and had a string that he was playing with. And that was his object of comfort and also self-stimulatory behavior. Tunnel vision can also impact your work greatly. If you are responding to a school and they've had a fire alarm that's gone off, and there is a student with autism that is sitting in the class just staring at the light on the wall, completely oblivious that everyone else in his class has left. Or it could be that they are at home in the same situation. It could have happened where you were just the other day, where somebody, you know, there's a fire in the kitchen, and upstairs you can hear the fire alarm going off, but that individual is just playing video games and completely zoned out, completely focused on that one activity and oblivious to everything else that's going on. Tunnel vision can impact situations rather quickly. The next piece, withholding attention and poor impulse control, those two look a lot like attention deficit disorder, okay, ADD or ADHD. We see that a lot of individuals with autism have those characteristics. Sometimes they'll have both diagnoses, but usually they just have one or the other. And finally, to wrap up on this slide, personal space and physical contact. Some individuals with autism have very large personal bubbles, okay? They don't want you in their bubble. They don't want you to touch them. They don't want you dare to even say, look at them. They just want to be left alone, all right? Other individuals have no personal bubble and think that you don't either. And so they will be all up in your personal space until you say a very clear directive of, please take 2 steps back. Don't ask them to, because if you ask them, what might they do? Say, no thanks, all right? And we'll get to that in a second whenever we talk about communication. Communication is taken very literally. So if you give them, if you are trying to ask them to do something, they will take it as a question. You know, they have a choice whether or not to do these things. So be very concise in your directions of take 2 steps back. When they do that, if they took 2 little baby steps and you need them further away from you, tell them to take more steps back, all right? Likewise, with physical contact, some individuals have no problem with physical contact, all right? Other individuals really struggle with it, all right? Some individuals report that whenever they are lightly touched, that it feels like pins and needles. So if you need to look at their arm because there's a cut on it, or you need to take blood pressure or do other vitals and things like that, then you either need to ask them, or if you go for a light touch and they kind of pull away, you can ask at that point if they would prefer deeper pressure, or you could simply try deeper pressure and see if that kind of alleviates the situation. The next piece of the triangle is communication. And so here we are going to talk about communication style and types of communication. So most of us verbally communicate, but there's a whole wealth of communication that is done non-verbally. What are some of those ways? Body language. What else? Hand signals. Sure. And those can be informal, like gestures that we've adopted culturally. Or it could be something more formal, like a sign language too, right? Okay, what else? What about tone of voice? Facial expression, proximity, body posturing. Do all of those things communicate as well in the course of a conversation? Definitely, right? So a lot of times individuals with autism, all those other things are completely lost on them. So what they hear within a conversation is the verbal language only. They don't pick up that you are getting closer to them and your voice is getting louder, which typically would signal to us what? Something's about to go down, right? You're usually heated, you're usually upset in those moments. Okay? So remember that if you are engaging with someone with autism or someone that you suspect has autism, make sure that your words are communicating what you need. All right? So if it is an urgent situation, don't put on your dad face or your angry neighbor face or whatever face you have that means business. Don't worry about that. It'll probably come through anyway, but you need to make sure that your words are also communicating that. All right? So if you typically can just say to someone, please move to the fire truck, and that gets the job done, then that's fine because you've got your stern face and your stern look, your stern type of voice and things like that. But with individuals with autism, your words need to communicate that as well. All right? Other things that we think of whenever we're looking at verbal versus nonverbal communication are actual communication styles. So individuals with autism will get their needs met in one way or another. A lot of individuals are able to verbally communicate. Now in stressful situations, they might have a more difficult time finding their words. Okay? Sometimes what we find is that individuals with autism are not verbally communicative. They don't communicate verbally like you or I, but rather they communicate using pictures. They might communicate using a tablet or device. All right, there's lots and lots of apps now that you can even get on a cell phone that they can use to communicate with you. Other times individuals prefer to write. They'll use pen and paper, they'll type, they could text to you in a situation where you had your phone available. So I just encourage you to remember that if an individual is not able to verbally communicate, does not mean that they are not able to understand every single word that you're saying. And remember, one of the senses that is often heightened in individuals with autism is hearing. So if you guys over here are talking about me, I might be able to hear you, okay? So just keep that in mind too, that sometimes just because you're not in close proximity to an individual, if their sense of sound is heightened, they could also hear those conversations. So just be aware. I know you guys would never say anything bad about anyone, but just be aware of those types of things. On that same topic, I think it's important here to address processing speeds. Individuals with autism struggle oftentimes with processing information. So if you ask them, what is your name? Don't be surprised if it takes them 3 to 5 seconds to answer. We think 3 to 5 seconds doesn't sound like very long, but the next conversation you have, try to wait 3 to 5 seconds before you respond and see if that person that you're talking with doesn't ask again. I bet they will. Okay? Even with us having those abilities of giving some verbal, or not verbal, but nonverbal cues that we're processing what they've said, people still want a response like that. Now remember, individuals with autism, they struggle with all those nonverbal things. So while we're processing something, it takes us a little bit longer, we might have like changes in our facial features, to indicate that we're thinking hard about something or we're trying to find the right words to something. Individuals with autism, they might not have any change in facial expression. So it might be difficult to know, quote unquote, that they are processing that information, but just give them a little bit more time. Unrelated topics. Most of us have something that we really like and that we're really good at. Individual with autism, no different. Some individuals with autism know a lot about specific subjects, okay? It might be Star Wars, it might be World War II, it might be vacuum cleaners. And if you ask them what their address is and they start talking about vacuum cleaners, allow them to do that. If they ask you what type of vacuum cleaner you have, and you don't own a vacuum cleaner, 1, go and buy one. 2, I would encourage you to go down that road with them and humor them and tell them, I have an Orwick such and such, or whatever it is that you have, all right? If that is their interest, that is their communication to you that they, one, want to engage with you, right? They're wanting to build rapport with you, build a relationship with you. And two, it could also indicate that this questioning that you're doing with me right now is really uncomfortable. So I'm going to pull back and be in control of the situation by telling you all the things that I know about something. Because there's not a question that you can ask me about vacuum cleaners that I won't know the answer to. So it puts me in control, right? So allow them to have that control, and then after a few moments, bring your question back into play. With sarcasm and idioms, I've heard rumors that you guys use a lot of sarcasm. No, not at all, never, all right? So again, remember with sarcasm, one of the reasons that sarcasm works is tone of voice, it's timing, it's all these things. If those things are lost on an individual and all that they do is take that language literally, how is that going to come across? Probably pretty rude and offensive, right? What we also see sometimes is that individuals with autism, as they're kind of navigating the teen and adult world, they might start to see that when people are sarcastic, other people laugh, and it's fun, right? And they might try to be sarcastic themselves. They might say the exact same thing that you have just said with inflection in your voice and timing and all these other things, and they don't have that down yet. And so then they look like the jerk face, right? Because they don't have all these other things in place. So it's very possible that those things could happen. With idioms, things like jump up on the stretcher, if that's taken literally, what are they going to do? They're going to jump up on the stretcher, and don't you dare get mad at them because you just told them to jump up on the stretcher. Okay, so just keep those things in mind when you're interacting with individuals with autism or those that you suspect are on the autism spectrum. So this is one of the clips from Big Bang Theory. It's one of our favorites. This is Penny, and she lives across the hall from Leonard and Sheldon, and she has given them an emergency key, right? What are emergency keys for? Emergencies. Is it an emergency that Sheldon was at her apartment the day before and noticed that it was very unorganized and disorderly? Probably not really, right? Well, Sheldon thought it was, so he went to her apartment in the middle of the night while she was sleeping and cleaned her house for her, cleaned her apartment for her. Wasn't that nice of him? So this is their interaction the next morning.
Do you understand how creepy this is?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at length last night.
In my apartment, while I was sleeping.
And snoring. And that's probably just a sinus infection. But it could be sleep apnea. You might want to see an otolaryngologist. The throat doctor.
And what kind of doctor removes shoes from asses?
Depending on the depth, that's either a proctologist or a general surgeon. Oh.
All right, so if we have those characteristics that we just talked about, and we were kind of doing a checklist here, what would we see in this clip?
Literally responsive to sarcasm and idioms.
Yes. Struggled with that a little bit, right? All right. What was he missing with his interaction with Penny?
She's doing it right now.
Eye contact?
Body's turned away, Sherry.
Yeah. Right.
What is he missing on her?
Doesn't know she's mad.
How do you all know that she's mad?
She got her hands on her head.
Yeah, so that proximity right there, you know, as she was talking, she was getting closer, her hands were on her hips, her tone of voice was changing, completely lost on him, all right? Or it might not be lost, it might be completely misconstrued. He might take it for a completely different reason. All right, who is this? The Good Doctor. I still haven't seen it. People tell me I need to see it. Again, I think that some individuals have stated that it's kind of, again, a Hollywood portrayal of autism. It's kind of over the top. But what I have heard that they do a really nice job of is show that social rules and social norms are kind of hard for this individual. Is his name Sean? Is that right for those of you that have seen it? No one's seen it, they just know his picture? Okay. It's Sean. All right. So that he has a hard time with social rules and social norms. And so that's what we're going to talk about on this slide. So we talked about how individuals with autism might struggle with facial expressions and understanding all those different things. And that's the last thing here as well. But they might also have trouble discerning different emotions, okay? They might have a difficult time discerning that in themselves and in others. So one of the individuals that I first developed this training with, his son at the time was a teenager, and he said that he found that his dad had two emotions, if you will. He was either happy or he was mad. Now, in the life of raising a teenage son, are there far more emotions that you might experience than happy and mad? Yeah, right? Does anybody have a teenage son? That's it for you? Okay, maybe not. All right, that might perfectly explain everything. But what John was seeing was that whenever he was frustrated with something that his son did, his son wasn't able to understand that he wasn't mad at him, because all that he saw was happy and mad. And John wasn't mad or happy. He was frustrated, right? Or if John was excited about something, he was happy that something was happening, but he was excited that this milestone had been met. When his son got his driver's license, he was really ecstatic. He was over the moon, right? That's like beyond happy. But his son saw happy and mad, and those were the only two things. Other times you might see that individuals might respond in ways that you wouldn't think typical. So you might be responding to an automobile accident. Mom and sister aren't severely injured, but they're crying, they're kind of, really worked up. Understandably so, right? They were just in an accident. And their brother, one, might be saying, stop crying. Why are you crying? That's too loud. All those things. Or it could be the flip side, that he could be like laughing hysterically, right? And that laughing hysterically might be that he is really shooken up and that's all that he knows to do, or that's all his body knows to do, all right? So those might come into play like that. You might also see that individuals with autism have a really difficult time with eye contact. Some individuals have either learned by experience or through direct instruction that eye contact is really important in our culture. And so what they might do is have like over-the-top eye contact. They'll just keep staring at you and it gets really uncomfortable and you really want them to look away and they never do. Thank you. Usually it lasts a lot longer than that, but that's all I got for you today. So it could be over the top, just staring at you, staring through you, kind of thing. Or it could be the flip side where they really struggle to even look in your general vicinity. I work with a lady that whenever I'm talking with her, she literally somehow in the course of our conversation gets her body turned and then she will answer me. She's gotten a lot better at this, but initially she would answer me with her back to me. Okay, now she will be in my general vicinity and her body is positioned towards me, but now she will either look beyond me, look kind of over my shoulder. Sometimes I can get her to look at the scar on my forehead, but oftentimes what she does is her head is up and her eyes are closed, right? For her, eye contact is a huge, huge struggle. Some individuals say that it's physically painful. She's not able to specifically say why it's so hard for her. She struggles a lot with lights, and so it wasn't until about 3 times a meeting with her that I realized that the light coming through my horizontal blinds in my office was really, really hard for her. I noticed that if we were ever meeting in there, she would more so than in other locations have her eyes closed. So I finally asked her one day, and she said, yeah, the light coming through is really hard for me to focus with that light coming through. That's simple, right? Turn the little knob and we don't have any light coming through anymore. Other individuals report that because this last one, this interpreting facial cues and body language, because that's so hard, we have so much that we're conveying whenever we talk on our face. And if you have a hard time interpreting that, and you're looking at someone in the eye while they're talking to you, and you're trying to figure all that out while they're talking and giving you directions, it might be really difficult to really focus on their words because you're focused on trying to figure out what their face is trying to say to you, okay? So just kind of take that for what it's worth. Know that if an individual is not looking at you, does not mean that they're not listening to you, all right? I have that conversation with the clients that I work with just about on a daily basis. I am listening to you, I'm just not looking at you. I said, I know, but when you go to that job interview next Tuesday, they're going to want you to look in their general vicinity. And if you're not going to get the job, okay? They may also appear unresponsive. I think that ties very closely in with the delayed processing speed, okay? It might just take them longer to answer. It might also be that they're nonverbal communicators, okay? Or it could be that they don't know the answer to your question, so they're just going to walk away instead of answering it. Social rules for a lot of individuals are really, really difficult. What was the social rule that Sheldon did not get in the previous clip that we just watched?
Using the key for an actual emergency.
Using the key for an actual emergency, what did you guys say? Don't go into somebody's apartment in the middle of the night. Right, yeah, definitely. So if you're going to clean my apartment, I'd prefer that you do it when I'm not there, right? But really you need to ask my permission altogether. He didn't understand any of that. That was completely lost on him. There are so many unwritten social rules in our community, in our world. For instance, one of the social rules that you all did without, to my knowledge, anyone saying was that whenever you came in and sat down and looked up here, and your eyes have been tracking me regardless of where I've stood, right? That's a social rule that you all have learned over time. Individuals with autism can sometimes struggle with generalizing that skill. So maybe Chad met you guys out there and said, hey, when Heidi's standing up there, you're going to kind of keep your eyes gazed on her throughout the course of the training. And then whenever I leave, Chad is going to get up here. And unless Chad says to you again, now I'm going to present, and you're going to keep your eyes tracked on me throughout the course of this training, individuals with autism may or may not be able to generalize that what they did with me is also what they need to do with Chad, okay? We see this really a lot of times where individuals will learn to do something at home, and then they go to school and the teacher's like, I can't get them to do that for anything, okay? This can be really, really important because if they are taught safety skills at school and those aren't reinforced and practiced at home, what might happen in an emergency situation? They won't know what to do, okay? So those skills don't generalize and vice versa. So it's really, really important to have it in multiple environments with multiple people. They may appear rude or inappropriate. Again, we're looking here at the social interaction piece. So sometimes individuals with autism, because of their very definite black or white thinking, very literal interpretation of things, oftentimes they also don't have this social filter that you and I have, okay? So it would not be atypical for an individual to walk up to me and say, hey, you've got a big nose, or hey, you're bald, all right? And so if I take that personally, that could really disrupt my relationship and rapport with that person. If I suspect that they're on the spectrum, or if I know that they're on the spectrum, I might take that in a different way, okay? That, you know what? Totally true. Got a big nose. Totally true. You're bald. Sorry. If you didn't know that. But those things can really come into play and can really disrupt relationships. So we mention this because if you're engaging with someone with autism and you're chewing gum and they tell you to stop smacking that gum, what they're really trying to tell you is, please stop chewing your gum. It's annoying me. It's irritating me. Why don't you have a piece for me? Who knows what the reason is? They might tell you the reason, but don't take it personally, okay? Spit out the gum, put a new one in later, and move on about your day. And then I think we've talked a lot about the facial cues and body language. So in this last clip of Sheldon, I want you again, keep the triad of characteristics in mind. All right, see which ones you can check off, and then we'll talk about it in just a moment.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
How's your leg?
Very good. Thanks for asking. Come on in.
Oh, good, Penny. You're here to exchange gifts. You'll be pleased to know I'm prepared for whatever you have to offer.
Okay, here.
I should note, I'm having some digestive distress. So if I excuse myself abruptly, don't be alarmed. Oh, a napkin.
Turn it over.
To Sheldon, live long and prosper. Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, he came into the restaurant. Sorry, the napkin's dirty. He wiped his mouth with it.
I possess the DNA of Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, I guess, but look, he signed it.
Do you realize what this means? All I need is a healthy ovum and I can grow my own Leonard Nimoy.
Okay, all I'm giving you is the napkin, Sheldon.
Be right back.
Sheldon, what did you do?
I know. It's not enough, is it? Here.
Leonard, look, Sheldon's hugging me.
It's a Saturnalia miracle.
Thinking about that triad of characteristics, what are some of the things that we saw? Yes, very socially awkward. And in what respects? Like, what are some examples?
Struggles to interact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so with that, I kind of think, I kind of take it a step further and look at social norms and social rules. So whenever she first came in, he went right to his plan. Right, yeah. And he talked about his digestive distress, right? Now, he may or may not have had that, but in my opinion, that was his plan to leave the room, right? Because he said right before that, I'm prepared for whatever you have to offer, right? So the gift-giving thing is really hard for him. It's hard for a lot of us. And so he wanted to make sure that he had gifts of varying monetary value so that he could be prepared for whatever she was going to give him, right? So he had also determined this plan that he will tell her, which is socially awkward, right, that I'm having some digestive distress, and if I have to leave abruptly, don't be alarmed. Because what he's going to do is open the gift, have digestive distress, have to leave, and when he comes back, he's going to have the gift of the appropriate value, okay? So whenever all that happened, what did she give him? A napkin, just a napkin. But what was on the napkin? Autograph. An autograph and? DNA. All right. So when that happened, how did he respond? He got really excited, and he remembered in the heat of the excitement that, oh shoot, I have to go and get the gifts, right? What gifts did he select? All the gifts. And what was her response? Sheldon, what have you done? And so with her inflection, the context of the scenario and things like that, you or I know, like, he is over the top giving gifts, and he took it as, I didn't do enough. And so that's when he went in for the hug. All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening to the first half of the training. We'd like you to take a 5-minute break, not a 5-minute firefighter break, but a 5-minute break, and come back, and Chad will follow up with the second half looking at strategies related to the characteristics.